Good evening, adventurers, and we are here with Kaldheim pre-release. Wyatt is here to open up a Kaldheim pre-release pack for everybody. So let's see what these cards have in store for us today. Alright, let's see. Got the plastic wrap here. One second. Let's see. Get the plastic wrap. Do a little bit of a pack opening and see what actually comes inside one of these, for those who may not know. Alright, so we have the outer layer here with Kaya, the ghost assassin with dual axes. And on the inside, you can actually see a lot of the artwork for what's coming soon. It's going to be awesome. Alright, let's see what this foil pre-release is. Ooh! Foil pre-release Yorn, God of Winter. We actually mentioned this on the stream the other day. We were talking about cards in the set. And so for Yorn, God of Winter, he is a 3/3 legendary snow creature god. Whenever he attacks, you untap each snow permanent you control. And then the flip side of him is Cauldring the Rune Staff. And you may play target snow permanent card from your graveyard this turn, and then if you do, it enters the battlefield tapped, which is not too shabby in the least. And then in addition to everything else inside the pre-release kit, we have the booster packs and a lovely spin down. Every set has the set symbol for the spin down counter. And it's always interesting because it goes 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, and it just keeps going for when you actually have a pre-release event. And speaking of a pre-release event, let's start cracking some packs. Because when you actually are on a pre-release event, pretty much this pre-release pack is what you have to build your deck from, and it is the complete roster of goodies. Goodies! Yes, Scott. This symbol is the Planeswalker symbol, and this is one of the new playmats that actually is released for the set, and I have more off to the side to show off what else these artists from Wizards of the Coast are up to, because it looks good. Alright, so to begin, Breakneck Berserker, a 3/2 with haste common. We also have Warhorn Blast for creatures you control to get +2/+1 until end of turn with Foretell. And so Foretell is a new thing that's in this set, because every set Wizards likes to introduce a little bit something new to keep it spicy. And so for Foretell, you spend a white and 2 generic for actually being able to cast it. But as far as Foretell in general, during your turn you can pay 2 generic mana and exile it from your hand face down, and then you cast it on a later turn for its Foretell cost. And so as far as how this would generally function, you have a whole roster of Foretell cards in your hand, and you can spend 2 generic mana to send it off to the side for a little bit, face down, so your opponents can't entirely see it. And then on a later turn, you cast it for 1 white and 2 generic, which is a 2 mana discount from what it is beforehand. So a well-timed play with Foretell would always be a nice play. Next we have Brine Barrow Intruder for a 1/2, a 1 blue flash creature. Whenever it enters the battlefield, target creature opponent controls gains -2/-0. Interesting to see where this goes, but it's also a nice blocker whenever that comes in. Let's see. Broken Wings. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying at instant speed. Always nice, and always definitely helpful, because with this set, there's going to be a lot of flying demons, flying berserkers, whole bunch of stuff coming through the air. Next is Skull Raid for 1 black and 3 generic for a sorcery. Target opponent discards 2 cards. If fewer than 2 cards were discarded this way, you draw cards equal to the difference, also with Foretell. And so it is a 4-drop spell, normally, if you're trying to hard cast it. But for Foretelling, if you spend 2 on an earlier turn during your turn, and you decide to exile it, then you can cast it for a whole 2 mana less. And so it might not be a bad idea to set some of these Foretell cards aside for later, and there's also a commander deck focused around the Foretell mechanic. So it should be interesting. And there's boats. I love boats. Boats are fun. But yes, this is the Funeral Longboat. And so it is a 2 generic mana vehicle. And so it's a 3/3 Vigilance with Crew 1. And so you tap any number of creatures you control with total power 1 or more to make this an artifact creature. And so you get all the benefits of artifacts if you're playing Commander or Modern or one of the others, or even Standard, because I believe there will be some artifact help in Standard whenever it does drop. And then you just have this boat dying in place of your creatures to make sure you can keep your key pieces safe. Ravenous Lindworm. Whenever it enters the battlefield, gain 4 life. It's a 6-drop for a 6/6, which is generally pretty average for a common green creature. But it's always nice to have some life gain as well. And if you're in blue and you have some funky bounce mechanics to bring it back to the battlefield, you have a life gain source as well, which is always useful. And here we actually have one of the new Planeswalkers in the set, Nico. And so Nico is a white and blue Planeswalker, and this is a card featuring their artwork. And so for a blue and 3 generic, you get to scry 2 and then draw 2 cards, which ultimately is a little bit high cost for 4 mana. But that's where Foretell comes in handy, because you can set this aside for later when you really need that card draw or that card advantage. Revitalize, Revitalize, oldie but a goodie. You just get to gain 3 life and draw a card at instant speed for 1 white and 1 generic. Raiders Carve. So this is interesting in my opinion, because you have a single pack and 2 artifacts already. And as mentioned in the last video where you had me and Tyler on camera, there's a whole bunch of dwarves in this set, and dwarves benefit off of artifacts and these vehicles being in play, so it'll be real interesting to see how that happens. And so for Raiders Carve, it is a 3 generic artifact vehicle for a 4/4 and crew 3, but whenever it attacks, you look at the top card of your library, and if it's a land card, you can put it onto the battlefield tapped. In a more limited format, that'll be very useful for decks that don't really have that much mana ramp, and so you'll be able to put cards from the top of your deck directly onto the battlefield. And so if you're looking for ways to kind of use this in a constructed format, or even in standard or draft, with these kind of cards, if you have, say, 2 Raiders Carves out, and then you just did Behold the Multiverse, if you're able to scry 2, and you either have a mana pocket, you're trying to build a bit of a mana pocket, you can put more spells on the bottom of your deck, or just keep them there to draw 2 cards and hope you hit a few lands, swing with the Raiders Carves, you then have those cards directly onto the battlefield, and you have ramped just for attacking, which is usually what red decks, or even red-blue sometimes, would like to do. Binding the Old Gods is a saga. So we first saw sagas come out in Dominaria, and so as any saga enters the battlefield, it gets a lore counter, and so you get that first trigger as soon as it enters, and then after your draw step, you add a lore counter to it and continue the triggers as it goes down. And so for 4 mana and entering the battlefield, you get to destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls. For 2, you search a library for a forest card, not a basic forest, just any forest. And so with the triomes, those all have the keywords for like forest, island, and swamp, and then you can just search for that card and put it directly onto the battlefield. And then creatures you control gain Death Touch until end of turn. And there is a uncommon legendary creature in this set who would absolutely love that keyword. Next is Ascent of the Worthy. So for a black, a white, and 1 generic, you can choose a creature you control. Until end of turn, all damage that will be dealt to creatures you control is dealt to it instead. And so if you have a high toughness creature, say the Ravenous Lindworm, and you're able to pair these 2 together, you can have this tank out. A lot of the damage is going to be coming its way, and it'll still be able to live, which is nice, so you can swing with most of the rest of your board. And then for the 3rd lore counter, you return to our creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a flying counter on it, and it is now an Angel Warrior in addition to its other types. So it's also a little bit of a recursion, which is always very helpful. And then Icebind Pillar for a blue and 2 generic. You get to spend a snow mana, and snow mana is produced by 1 mana from any snow source to tap target artifact or creature, so keep some of them aggro pieces tapped down. And next is going to be Tybalt's Trickery. I'm definitely looking forward to this one, because for Tybalt's Trickery, it is a counter spell in mono red. And so you counter target spell, choose 1, 2, or 3 at random. And so its controller mills that many cards, so the controller of the spell that this is countering, and then exiles from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell, and they can cast it without paying its mana cost. And so it's one of those things, it's kind of like a Chaos Warp in the sense that you are trading the really dangerous thing for a less dangerous thing. And snow-covered lands are back! I'm excited! And so to describe, it is still a basic land, but is a basic snow land, and so this will tap for snow mana to fit the cost of any of the snow cards. And then I have a token for a zombie berserker. 2/2. Alright. Now that we've gone through a few of the basics of the set, let's get to cracking packs, because I'm excited! Alright. Next one. There we go. Alright. So we have Undersea Invader when it enters the battlefield. Tapped Flash. So you can get this out on somebody's end step and just have a big swinger or blocker for next turn. Craven Hulk can't block alone, so it's a 4/4 for 4 mana, and so for a red and 3 generic. Nothing too crazy, and it's also a coward, which is interesting, for a giant creature. So this will be running with a few more of the warrior and coward keywords that are available through Magic. A 1/2 flying first strike for a 1 white battlefield raptor. Give it death touch, and then pretty much it'll come out on top of any combat phase, despite of what's coming at it. Disdainful Stroke. This is honestly one of my favorite counter spells for when I'm actually playing in Commander, because for 1 blue and 1 generic, you just counter a target spell with CMC 4 or greater. CMC meaning converted mana cost. And so whenever they have their big spells coming out, just be like, nope, no spells for you. And here we're actually seeing a lot of the elves come through. So Jaspera Sentinel for 1 green is a 1/2 with reach, and then you tapped an untapped creature you control to add 1 mana of any color. And so if you have a lot of elves or just any other general creatures on the battlefield, you are able to use this card to turn any of those other creatures into a mana source, which is always helpful when you have a limited card pool. Elderfang Disciple, so for 1 black and 1 generic, a 1/1 elf cleric. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. And so this will be more helpful if you're trying to strip cards from your opponent's hand. And so if you have some way to either blink the creature, which is basically bringing it out and back to the battlefield, you'll get multiple triggers off that. Or if you have some way to recur it from the graveyard, that'll also be helpful for making sure that you can keep the upper hand. Demon Bolt. Lovely artwork there from, let's see who drew this. Campbell White. Lovely artwork. So for Demon Bolt, it is a foretell card, and so for 2 on an earlier turn, you can exile it from your hand and set aside for later. And then to actually cast it, hard cast, it is 1 red and 2 generic to have it deal 4 damage to our creature or planeswalker. Another snow card, but it does not require any snow to cast it. And so for 1 green and 1 generic, you get a 2/2 elf rogue snow creature, Sculptor of Winter, and then you can tap this to untap a snow land. And so the way these will generally function for untapping is that it is a kind of roundabout way for mana ramp. And so when you have any snow lands on table, if you have the snow land, you tap it for 1 mana. You're still in your main phase, secondary main phase, combat, whichever. You can tap this creature while that mana is still in your mana pool to untap that snow land and then just add that mana. And then you're able to get 2 mana out of 1 land, which is always helpful. Shackles of Treachery. We actually get our first look at some of the gods in this set. And so for 1 red and 2 generic, a sorcery, you gain control of target creature until end of turn. You untap it, and then until end of turn it gains haste, and whenever this creature deals damage, destroy target equipment attached to it. And so since this set is having a lot of artifact help, you might want to have this in mind if you're ever at a draft, so you can get rid of some of those pesky artifacts. And Raven Form. Exile target artifact or creature, its controller makes a 1/1 blue bird creature token. That's pretty mean, because now you're able to get rid of, say, some of these artifacts that are on the battlefield that are just going to be causing problems. Preemptive solutions. And now we are in some of the changelings for a Bloodline Pretender. So for 3 generic, you get a 2/2 changeling, and as it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever another creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on Bloodline Pretender. And so as you're blinking other things, those are enter the battlefield abilities, and then you just put a whole bunch of +1/+1s on them. And here he is, the man himself, Finn the Fangbearer. For a 1 green and 1 generic, you get a legendary creature, Human Warrior. He is a 1/3 with Death Touch, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, they get 2 poison counters. And so as that progresses, the more poison counters they have, the closer they are to losing the game, because they only need 10, and then they are out. And that is definitely going to hurt. Next is Fearless Liberator. And so for Boast, you are able to activate this ability only if a creature attacked this turn and only once. But to Boast, you get to create a 2/1 red dwarf berserker creature token. And so for this kind of deck style, if you have this creature and it's pretty much up to snuff with a whole bunch of equipments, you're able to swing this. And so as it's attacked, you have met the requirement. You just pay the mana, you make additional creatures to block to make sure you are not exposed. Reflections of Litjara, if I'm saying that correctly. And so as it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and when you cast a spell of the chosen type, copy that spell, and those copies can become tokens. That is scary if you're running any kind of tribal deck. And a snow-covered forest, and then we also have a flip. And so for a lot of these cards, that if they do have dual sides, like my foil promo here, since it does have 2 sides, you can't really put this card itself inside the deck, because then your opponents will see it coming a mile away, especially if it's that shiny. And so you just use this card, and so since it has the normal back, you just put what names the card is on the front, and then you just put this in your deck instead. Alright, next pack. Woo! Next pack. Next pack. Let's get Kraken, because Kraken is the best thing. Especially on your days off. It's always nice. Yeah, let's keep it moving. Wings of the Cosmos. Target creature gets +1/+3 and gains flying, and you untap it. Always helpful. We have another Brine Barrow Intruder. Snakeskin Veil. These cards are always helpful when you actually have key pieces you want to protect, because this puts a +1/+1 counter on it, which is okay, or a creature you control, and then it gains hexproof. That means it cannot be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. So removal, it's safe from. Control spells, it's safe from. It stays on your board. Dread Rider. It's a little expensive for 1 black and 5 generic. But then you pay a black and 1 and tap it to exile a creature card from your graveyard and make target opponent lose 3 life. That's more helpful for a passive win condition. Ravenous Lindworm is here yet again, here to wreak some havoc. And then Squash. It's always fun to have these ones. And so this spell costs 3 generic less to cast if you control a giant, and then it deals 6 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So it can be a 2-drop spell, just literally flatten something. And we have another Raider's Car for getting lands onto the battlefield. We have a Behold the Multiverse yet again. A 5/5 for 5, so another pretty much breaking even creature. You spend 5 mana, you get 5 power and 5 toughness for a good blocker or attacker. We have another Revitalize for gaining 3 life and drawing a card. And the Trickster God's Heist. That is actually Tybalt featured on the bottom of the artwork. So let's see what he's been up to since War of the Spark. And so when it enters, you may exchange control of 2 target creatures. If you're in a multiplayer game, it just says 2 target. They do not have to be your creatures. And then you may exchange control of 2 target non-basic, non-creature permanents that share a card type. So you can hit lands with that. They just can't be basic lands. And then the last one is target player loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. And these effects do not end. They just exchange control. So if you have a very high trouble creature on the other side of the battlefield, you use this and you just have that really high trouble creature. And we have a legendary Vega the Watcher for 1 blue, 1 white, and 1 generic for a 2/2 flyer. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, draw a card. And so what that would pair with are these Foretell cards. As Foretell is being cast from exile. It is not being cast from your hand. And so whenever you Foretell a card, Vega the Watcher draws you a card. And who do we have here? Kaya's Onslaught, and that is actually Vorinclex in the image, the voice of hunger himself. And so for a white and 2 generic at instant speed, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains double strike. Ooh, ouch. And we have Cosima, God of the Voyage. This is another card I've been super excited about. And so this is something we featured on the episode where Tyler and I were talking about the set. And this is the land boat. This is the boat that steals lands whenever it deals damage to a player. I'm very excited for that. You're probably going in a deck. And then a snow-covered mountain. So we have a swamp, mountain, and I believe I pulled a forest already as well. Next. Next pack. Let's see. And up front is Fearless Pup. So for 1 red, you get a 1/1 first strike, and you can boast. And so by the looks of it, once this creature is declared as an attacker, you can actually boast before blockers are declared, giving it a little bit of a bonus on the swing. Oop, excuse me. God's Hall Guardian. A 3/6 Vigilance for 6 mana, or if you do it earlier in the game, say about turn 1 or turn 2, you exile it from your hand and you can get it for 4 mana instead. I like saving mana. Everyone does. Another Undersea Invader for a 5/6 with Flash. King Herald's Revenge. So until end of turn, target creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control and gains trample. It must be blocked this turn if able. Token decks, I would keep an eye on this because this is going to be a 5-cent common for a bulk card through us here at Tower Games. And so if you have a whole bunch of creatures on table and you just need to have something be able to make it across, King Herald's Revenge will definitely be the one to make it, especially with Elf Tribal coming back. Dread Rider is back, a 3/7 for 6 mana. Another Grizzled Outrider. Revitalize. Carfell Kennel Master, something with dogs. So for 1 black and 4 generic, Whenever Karfell Kennel Master enters the battlefield, up to 2 target creatures each get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn. Sounds like a good plan to me. Scorn Effigy. It's been a while since I've seen a Scarecrow. And so for 3 generic, you get a 2/3 creature. Or you can just foretell it for 0 on a later turn. Bind the Monster. And so for 1 blue, you can enchant a creature, and as this enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. It deals damage to you, as in the person who's casting this, equal to its power. So be careful what you're tapping down. And the enchanted creature does not untap during its controller's untap step. Rune of Flight. These are what actually enchant a permanent. Let's see. So yeah, enchant permanent. So theoretically, you could enchant a land. I don't know why you would, but you could. And so as it enters the battlefield, draw a card. As long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it has flying. Or as long as the enchanted permanent is an equipment, the equipped creature has flying. So you can put this on, say, one of the boats, or you can put this on a creature. And so whenever this thing becomes a artifact creature, it gains flying. Flying boats! Arnie Slays the Trolls, another one. And so for a red and a green, target creature you control fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. It's about standard for Gruul colors. On the second one, you get a red mana. You put 2+1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature you control, and you gain life equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So gain life for the big ones. Port of Karfell. And so it enters tap to create a blue. But for a later turn, you can spend black, and blue, and 3 generic to sacrifice the Port of Karfell and mill 4 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. I like that. Bring a creature from the graveyard back. The Bears of Litjara. And so for a blue, a green, 1 generic, you get another saga. And so the first one is to create a 2/2 blue shapeshifter creature token with changeling. And so it is all creature types. Second one is any number of target shapeshifters you control have basic power and toughness of 4/4. Always nice. And then for the third one, you choose up to 1 target creature or planeswalker, and each creature with power 4 or greater you control deals damage equal to its power to that permanent. Removal, anyone? And Alpine Meadows. So this is not a basic land, but it does have the mountain and plains keyword. So that means that this snowland is able to be fetched with any abilities that let you search for either mountains or plains. And a dwarf berserker. Not gonna lie, I'm mildly intimidated. Alright, we're almost to the end, folks. We got 2 more packs. Alright, next is Storyseeker for a 2/2 with lifelink for 2. So any damage it deals, you gain Strategic Planning. So for a blue and 1 sorcery, look at the top 3 cards of your library and put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Or depending on what card it is. Let's see, where did I put it? Or depending on what card, you could just be setting aside for later. Another Fearless Pup. Another God's Hall Guardian. Priest of the Haunted Edge. So for a black and 1 generic, you get a snow creature zombie cleric, a 0/4, and you sacrifice this creature. You sacrifice Priest of the Haunted Edge. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, so it's a variable until it's decided by the number of snow lands you control, and you can only use that ability anytime you have a sorcery. But in the meantime, he's a very good blocker for a 0/4. Another Yaspera Sentinel. Augury Raven, and so it's a 4-drop for a 3/3, which is again a little expensive. But it is a flyer, and you can cast it later for only 2 mana. So Foretell is going to be very useful for getting some of these high-drop creatures out. Code Spell Cleric is a 1-drop for a 1/1 Vigilance creature. As it enters the battlefield, if it was the second spell you cast this turn, you put a +1/+1 counter onto our creature. Another Feudal Longboat. Another Sculptor of Winter. Nico Defies Destiny. So for a blue, white, and 1 generic, you gain 2 life for each foretold card you own in exile, which is already very solid for how the set is going. And then for the second one is you add a blue and a white to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to foretell cards or cast spells that have foretell. And then the third one is return target card with foretell from your graveyard to your hand. So get some recurring value out of that. Boreal Outrider. Whenever you cast a creature spell, if snow mana of any of that spell's colors was spent to cast it, that creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1. So make these worms creatures that we're getting 7/7s if you spend a snow mana to get it out. That sounds like pain incoming. Invasion of the Giants. So for a red and a blue, you get to scry 2 upon entering the battlefield. The second ability is you draw a card, then you may reveal a giant card from your hand. When you do, Invasion of the Giants deals 2 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. Ruh-roh. And then the third one is the next giant spell you cast this turn costs 2 less, so you're saving mana on some really big creatures. Ooh, Varagoth, the Blood Sky Sire. So for a black and 2 generic, you get a legendary creature, Demon Rogue, and he has a 2/3 with Death Touch. And then for Boast is whenever this creature attacked this turn, target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top of it. So you can search your own library for cards as you need them. Ooh, I have a deck that could use that. And another snow-covered mountain with a human warrior. I wonder what this set is themed off of. Could anyone guess? And our last booster pack for this set. Let's see what we got. Let's see what is here. Alright. Alright, Seize the Spoils. And so for a red and 2 generic, you get a sorcery spell that has additional cost to cast this, discard a card, but then you draw 2 cards and create a treasure token. So replace what you don't need with stuff you do need. I'm always down for that. Another Battlefield Raptor. Berg Strider. So here we actually have some giants being shown off. And so when this enters the battlefield, tap target artifact or creature an opponent controls. If snow mana was spent to cast this spell, that permanent doesn't untap during controller's next untap step. And for a 5-drop, that is not really hard to do with this set. Icehide Troll for a 2/3 Troll Warrior. So for 2 snow mana of your choice, it gets +2/+0 and gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. So board wipes, removals, nope, he's just chilling. Death Knell Berserker. So an elf berserker, a 2/2 for a black and 1 generic. When it dies, if its power was 3 or greater, create a 2/2 black zombie berserker creature token. So it will need some help getting there, but it does replace itself upon death, which is always helpful. Frostbite is a snow instant. Alright. So for 1 red, you get an instant spell, and it deals 2 damage to a creature or a planeswalker. If you control 3 or more snow permanents, it deals 3 instead. So an easier to find lightning bolt, sort of. Another Augury Raven. Another code spell. Another Funeral Longboat, and Maja, Bredagard Protector. So for 2 white, a green, and 2 generic, other creatures you control get +1/+1, so it's an anthem. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. So a little bit of a human tribal piece. Avalanche Caller. And so for 1 blue and 1 generic, you get a 1/3 snow creature human wizard, and then you can pay 2 generic mana to make target snowland you control a 4/4 elemental creature with hexproof and haste that is still a land. That does not say until end of turn, so you just get a creature. So if you have 2 mana, just create a whole bunch of creatures. That is honestly scary, but that's only for snowlands though. Another Fearless Liberator. And Runeforge Champion is a card that actually does something with runes. Well, because, Runeforge. So for 1 white and 2 generic, you get a 2/3 Dwarf Warrior. As it enters the battlefield, you may search your library and or graveyard for a rune card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. And then you can pay 1 generic mana rather than pay the mana cost for rune spells you cast. And so for this set, if you are running a rune-heavy deck, you just pay 1 generic despite whatever colors you have on table at the time. Sulphurous Mire, and so it is a swamp mountain snowland, so this is also searchable. And then a Sculptor of Winter foil, and a lovely Treasure Goblet. And so that is everything that I had inside my pack upon opening. And so that is the pool of cards in an event I would be able to choose from. But since we aren't able to have events in store at this time, what we also have is that whenever you get a pre-release pack, you also get the 2 prize support packs that come with it. So I got 2 more packs to open. Alright. And now I start having trouble. No! Alright. Let's see. And so up front we have a flip card. Oh, this is reversed. Interesting. A snow-covered island and Saruf the Realm Eater, the wolf that is just a board wipe. So for 1 black, 1 green, and 1 generic, you get a 3/3 legendary wolf creature. So whenever a permanent an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, Put a +1/+1 counter on Saruf the Realm Eater. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Saruf has one or more +1/+1 counters on it, you may remove all of them. If you do, exile each other non-land permanent with CMC less than or equal to the number of counters removed this way. That does include yours, so be very careful when you decide to use them. Axeguard Armory enters the battlefield tapped, and so you can tap it for 1 white mana, or you can spend 1 generic, 2 red, and a white to tap it and sacrifice it to search your library for an aura and or equipment and reveal it and put it into your hand. Or you can get both, an aura and an equipment. Dwarven Hammer, fairly self-explanatory. So for 1 red and 2 generic, you get a artifact equipment. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 additional. And so if you do, create a 2/1 red dwarf creature token, then attach Dwarven Hammer to it. And so you immediately have a 5/1 with trample ready to go. Poison the Cup. So for 2 black and 1 generic, you get a instant spell to destroy a target creature, and if it was foretell, you scry 2. And so you can keep the spell on standby for later, and then you get the benefit of a destroyed threat, as well as being able to scry 2. Iron Verdict. And so for 1 white and 2 generic, for an instant, it deals 5 damage to target tapped creature. So since it's an instant, you can wait until your opponents decide to attack and then cast it and destroy the creature as it's coming across. Because very few creatures in this set are able to survive 5 damage like that. Depart the Realm. So for 1 blue and 1 generic, you can pretty much return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. It could be theirs or it could be yours for a lot of those bounce effects. Another squash. Wither Crown. So for 1 black and 1 generic, you have a enchantment aura. And so you enchant target creature, and enchanted creature has base power 0, and as at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life unless you sacrifice this creature. And so you'll pretty much take a creature out of the fight for swinging, and if they don't sacrifice it, they will continuously lose life, which is always a hard choice to make. Ice High Troll. Draugr Recruiter. So as this creature attacks, you may pay black and 3 generic to return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So a little bit of recursion already built into this set. King Herald's Revenge. Tuskeri Firewalker. And so for a red and 2 generic, you have a 3/2 human berserker with boast. And so the boast is 1 generic to exile a top card from your library, and you can play it this turn. And that includes lands, which is always helpful. Invoke the Divine, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and gain 4 life, along with another Funeral Longboat. And for the last pack, let's see what we have. Let's see what is here. Yeah, last pack for the day. Well, for the night. And so we have a 1/1 Elf Warrior creature token. A snow-covered island. Ooh, Ingo Rune Eyes. And so when she enters the battlefield, you scry 3. And when it dies, draw 3 cards if 3 or more creatures died this turn. She does not have a flip side, but this is what I was talking about when we were on stream the other night, about what the kind of different border looks like to kind of have that like wooden, like Nordic door type style that has like the framework and whatnot with the dragons on the side. Huge fan. Dragonkin Berserker. And so it is a 2/2 with first strike for 1 red and 1 generic. And so boast abilities you activate cost 1 less to activate for each dragon you control. And his boast ability just creates dragons, so he is a value piece in and of himself. Bloodline Protector to go along with our dragon tribal deck. Notvold Slumber Mound. So as it enters the battlefield tapped, you can, on your later turns, add red to your mana pool or sacrifice Notvold Slumber Mound to destroy target land, and then you create the Troll Warrior with trample. Svella the Ice Shaper. And so it is a snow creature troll warrior legendary for 1 green, 1 red, and 1 generic. And to pay 3, you can tap it to create a colorless snow artifact named Icy Manolith that is able to tap for mana. And then you can also pay a red, a green, and 6 generic to look at the top 4 cards of your library, and you may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost. And so this creature is a value engine in and of itself. Because on idle turns, you can just make things that give you more mana, or you can search your not search your library, but kind of filter through the top of your deck for cards that you need. Dwarven Reinforcements. So for a red and 3 generic, you get a sorcery spell that just creates 2/1 red dwarf berserker creature tokens, and you now have creatures. Or if you foretell it, you get 2 for 2. Pilfering Hawk. So for 1 blue, 1 generic, you get a snow creature bird. and it is a 1/2 with flying, and then for a snow, you can tap it to draw a card and discard a card. Little pilfer bird indeed. Coma's Faithful. So for a black and 2 generic, you get a 3/1 Elf Cleric with lifelink, and when it dies, each player mills 3 cards, and this hits your opponents too. So that is another way of kind of getting your win condition a little bit closer. Masked Vandal. So for 1 green, 1 generic, you get a 1/3 changeling. And when it enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls, and you choose what is exiled both times. So that's pretty nice, actually. And then Shimmer Drift Veil. As it enters the battlefield, tapped, you choose a color, and then you add 1 mana of the chosen color. Just mana fixed. Another Fearless Pup. Giant Ox. And this crews vehicles using its toughness rather than its power. So for a white and 1, you are able to crew anything that requires crew 6, which is definitely nice for some of the emphasis that this set has on vehicles. Haggai Mob, one of the two. And so it is a 5/4 for 1 red and 4 generic, and the boast ability is to have it deal 1 damage to any target for 1 red and 1 generic. Grarg. And lastly is Master Scald. So for 1 white and 4 generic, you get a 4/4 Dwarf Warrior. As it enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, return target artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. And that is what I got for this pre-release event. And honestly, that is a very solid pool of cards to start building a deck from. But that is what I have for actually pulling off some of the cards. But we do have other stuff for this set in store, including this playmat that you are seeing on camera, as well as playmats for a few other things, including the playmat for some of the alternate artworks for the gods. These are in store and available online for purchase for $21.99. And I've also got the playmat for the man, the myth, the Praetor himself, Vorinclex. I love that artwork. And even for this playmat, if you would like to be completely on theme, there are sleeves made by Ultra Pro that directly match it. Or if you're looking for something a little bit different, there's also other artworks available. So feel free to come in store at Indian River Road or on a Newport News, and then you can just take a look at our inventory. And that is about all I have for you guys for showing on camera. But for a little bit of information, we are sold out of pre-release packs here on Indian River Road. But for booster boxes, what I do have is I have 34 booster boxes remaining in store. And they will not be available online until release day. So if you would like a box, feel free to come in to either of our locations and pick up yours. Or call ahead at 757-420-8008 to make a reservation. That being said, I will see you guys next time. Bye.